Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of the Order of Man podcast and movement. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of heads up here. It's late. It's 11:15 my time, Thursday night, as I record this. That's because for the past 3 weeks or so, I've been on vacation with my family in Hawaii. And in all of my planning, I overlooked recording this Friday's podcast. So we just got back about a half an hour ago, and I have never missed a podcast episode. I think that's 325 plus consecutive weeks without missing a single episode. Not an interview, not the Ask Me Anything, not the Friday Field Notes, nothing. So I was going to let a trip to Hawaii ruin the 325 plus week streak that we have. So I'm a little tired, a little haggard. You can see I've been traveling literally for 24 hours. My hat has the classic sweat ring on it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that there because this is the hat that I hunted in while I was over there and played around and did the thing. But I wanted to talk with you about a post I made a couple of days ago because it sparked a lot of interest. And I wanted to give you the condensed version, if you will, of the origin of Order of Man, because as I made this post, there was a lot of, like I said, there was a lot of interest, there was a lot of comments, there was a lot of questions. And so as I start this, I want you to know that this is not going to be all about me and starting Order of Man. This is going to be about you and how you might take an idea or a feeling or a thought or something even you're remotely interested in and turning it into something similar to what we've been able to do here with this movement over the past 6 years. So as I think about what I wanted to share with you, what I'd like to do is just read verbatim this post because it obviously resonated with you. And if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you are at Ryan Mickler. That's very important because I just got a couple of messages from some friends that have shared with me that they can no longer tag me on Instagram. So Instagram is playing games with my account, which is to be expected. But I need you guys to go over there, follow, share, do the thing so we can overcome the bit of shadow banning that maybe had taken place. Anyways, here it is. So let me give you a bit of context. A friend of mine from about 6-7 years ago sent me a business card, one of my original business cards when I started in the financial planning business about 2008, 2009, I think is when this business card was from. And so here's what I put. I said, today, a friend of mine sent me a picture of my old business card as I was starting my financial planning practice circa 2008, 2009. I can't help but feel the misery of cold calling, weeks without sales, asking for referrals, struggling to make the mortgage payment. Ironic, I know. I'll get to that maybe here in a minute. And explaining to my wife that everything was going to be okay. I eventually started consulting with some high producers in our office to help me. Next, I hired a coach to help me build a successful financial advisory firm. And over time, with a lot of sweat, consistency, and sleepless nights, it all started to come together. But as it did, I always felt that I was meant to do something more. Something in the depth of myself told me I wasn't doing the work that I was meant to do. Eventually, I started a podcast dedicated to helping medical professionals with their financial services, which ended up leading me to start the Order of Man podcast. And here we are today, 13 years later, on the path that voice was explaining to me more than a decade ago. I suppose the moral of the story is to keep your head down, gentlemen. I know what it's like to do work that doesn't speak to you. I know what it's like to feel called to something more, but not knowing what or how to do it. I know the despair when deep down inside you, you feel like you're better than the results that you're currently producing. Keep going, man. Keep going. Evolve, adjust, adapt, learn, grow, build. Small, seemingly insignificant steps turn into lengthy strides you didn't even realize you were capable of. You are capable, but you have to keep going. It's the only way. And to the best of your abilities, be grateful for the sleepless nights and the despair in your soul. After all, that's what's forcing you to change. That's what's forcing you to evolve. That's what's forcing you to become more than who you currently are. So maybe that spoke to you the same way it did with thousands and thousands of guys here on Instagram. and the countless messages I've received about how do you start a business and where did Order a Man go and how did you come to this, and so many different questions. I wish I could answer them all today. We've probably answered a lot of them and are asked me anything in previous podcasts. And of course, I'm not planning on slowing down anytime soon. So I'm sure we'll address these as we continue on. But there's a quick synopsis of the Instagram post that I made that I just read to you. And so I want to give you a bit more context. Again, this is about service to you. It's not about beating on my chest or tooting my own horn or anything like that. But I want you to know I know what it feels like. As I said in that post, I know what it feels like to be engaged in work that you found some meaning in, you found some value in, you found purpose and even satisfaction in. I was helping people with their finances and getting them on the path to retirement and helping them pay off debt and get their money under control. That's valuable. There's meaning to that. But I remember having countless conversations with a good friend of mine, Greg Black, who was also in the financial planning practice or business. And we were actually partners at one point. And I remember talking to him over and over and over again about knowing that I'm not going to do this forever and being compelled and almost called to do something greater than what I was currently doing. Not more significant, but for me individually. And what's interesting is I think about Greg and I think about what he's doing in his financial planning firm because he's continued in the business. He feels the same way about what he's doing as I do about what we're doing here with Order of Man. So guys, there isn't one path, okay? It isn't that you have to be a financial advisor or you have to start your own podcast or you have to start a merchandise company or you have to go launch your own business. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that you need to constantly strive and work towards something that calls to you, that speaks to you, that fills your heart and your soul and your mind like it does me. Because if it didn't, look, it's now 11:20 my time, Thursday evening, before Friday, which is when the Friday Field Notes launches. If I wasn't deeply convicted about what we're doing here, do you think I'd be doing this right now? Of course I wouldn't. I'd be unpacking or I'd be laying in bed because I had a long travel and a long commute home, and I wouldn't be doing this. But here I am, getting back from vacation. As soon as I walk in the door, doing this podcast, checking emails, corresponding with people, checking my social media accounts. It's not necessarily because I just enjoy doing that. It's because this work is meaningful and significant to me. And so as I was thinking about my financial planning practice years and years ago, when I was in the business for about 9 years, I worked with another firm. Eventually I realized that the path to autonomy, which is my definition of success, doing what you want, when you want, how you want, that my path was going to have to be me starting my own financial planning firm, which I did. And there were a lot of sleepless nights. There were a lot of questions about how I was going to pay the mortgage. There was, as I said in the Instagram post, a lot of conversations with my wife explaining to her, even though income wasn't coming in at the rate we needed it to, that everything was going to be okay. Those were hard times. Those were difficult times. My wife, fortunately, had been doing some food preservation and food storage, and she always has. She continues to do that to this date. And good thing she did, because we lived off of that food storage. When I remember her asking, "Hey, hon, can I spend an extra $25-$50 on groceries?" And I was like, you could spend 20, not 50. You can spend $20 extra on groceries this month or this week. Those were tough times. I've told you before, I literally wore a dirt path in the grass, the sod of my backyard, wandering around. How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to pay the car payment? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to make sure I take care of my wife and my son, my one son at the time? It was rough. But fortunately, I was going to quit is what I was going to do in the financial planning business. I was going to throw in the towel. It just wasn't working. I was just going to go work a 9-to-5 somewhere and get paid 10, 15, 20 bucks an hour or whatever it was, because I didn't have a college degree. I still don't. And I was going to throw in the towel, but I'm a stubborn son of a gun. So I said, I'm not going to throw in the towel yet. I'm going to humble myself. And that's lesson number 1, humble yourself. And so I did. I humbled myself, and I went to a couple high producing agents, advisors in our office. And I said, "Hey, Teach me. I obviously don't know what I'm doing. You guys obviously do know what you're doing. Can you help me? And so what I would do is I would bring these guys in on my cases, and we would split any commission or any sales or revenue that was generated from working with those clients. And I thought immediately it was my ego, like, hey, I'm bringing the clients in. I don't want to split revenue with these guys. But I realized 100% of zero was still zero. And that 50 or 60 or 70 or 80% of some was some. But I was to that point. And it didn't have to get to that point. That's the thing we need to realize, guys. It doesn't have to get to the point where we're at rock bottom. And yet we do that because we get hard-headed and we get stubborn and we get arrogant and our ego gets in the way. And it's like, man, if I would have only asked for help 3 years earlier, how much further down the path would I would have been? But I was scared. I didn't want people to think that I was inferior or inadequate or that Ryan doesn't know what he doesn't have things figured out. But I wasn't fooling anybody. Most of all, myself. I wasn't fooling myself. I would go home and I would look in the mirror and I'd think, man, you're better than this, dude. You're better than this. And then when I would leave in the morning, I'd put the shield, the armor on, and I would say, okay, I got this. I'm not going to let anything penetrate this armor. And what it ended up doing, rather than making me strong, is it exposed all the chinks in the armor. And all I had to do was ask for help. So I hired I brought on a couple of guys to work with me. And I had some success doing that. And then I hired a mentor, an individual mentor. And I said, hey, I need help doing this. And this individual had success building other financial planning practices. So I hired him. I spent $1,500 to go visit him. I didn't have $1,500. I put it on credit. Non-refundable, $1,500 just to go out and visit and see if it's even something you wanted to do. Long story short, I ended up signing him a check for another $6,500, if I remember correctly. So we're into this thing $8,000 now. I remember calling my wife. Hey, hon, I spent this $1,500 we don't have. It's $6,500 to continue to work with this guy. We don't have. What do you think? And she said, I trust your decision. And that's the last thing I wanted to hear. I wanted her to make a decision, but how pathetic is that? I lacked the balls, frankly, to make a decision. I wanted her to say no. That's actually what I wanted. I wanted her to say, no, we don't have the money. And then that would have given me the excuse. See, then if the financial planning practice didn't work out, I could say, well, hon, it's because we didn't hire that mentor. And subconsciously, I was willing to put that on her shoulders. It doesn't belong on her shoulders. Guys, it belongs on mine. It belongs on your shoulders. But that's where I was. And she said, I trust you to make a decision, a good decision. I'm like, shit. Now I have to make the decision. And so I decided, yes, I'm going to do this because this is last attempt right here. Otherwise, I'm throwing in the towel. So we're doing this. And I hired this guy. And over time, my business gradually and then exponentially grew and expanded and took off, and residual income was coming in. I was picking up new clients and I was getting referrals, and life was pretty good. But deep down inside, I knew there was something more. Yeah, I was helping people their money. Yeah, they were paying off debt. They were saving for retirement. They were getting their insurances in check. Yeah, all that stuff. And it's all good. It's all wonderful. You should get that stuff taken care of. By the way, if you haven't, go do it. Don't message me about it. I get messages every day about this, especially when I do podcasts like this. Hey, Ryan, what's your financial advice? I don't do that anymore. I mean, I can give you some generic financial advice, but go work with somebody who can help you be successful. Somebody you know, somebody in your circle, or hire somebody. So I knew I was doing good work, but in my heart, I knew there was something more. And I really had this thought of new digital media. I was really fascinated and interested with the sales process. And this is lesson number 2. So lesson number 1 is be humble. Lesson number 2 is go where your interests are. Don't shut them down, because that's what we have a tendency to do is we think, well, this would be really cool, but I'd like to go down this avenue. Well, but this, and we come up with all of these excuses and reasons why we shouldn't do that. So lesson number 1 is be humble. Lesson number 2 is go where your interests are. Pursue your interests. the things that sound even remotely interesting to you. Pursue those things. And so I had this like new digital podcasting, grow a website, a blog. I'm like, man, all these old timers in the financial planning practice aren't doing this. So maybe this is something I could do. And I reached out to this guy. His name's Jeff Rose. Good Financial Sense. Look him up. If you need a financial advisor, I think he's still doing the work. Go check him out. Tell him Ryan sent you. So I reached out to this guy and I said, hey, man, I really like what you're doing. Nobody's doing what you're doing in the financial planning space. And I want you to coach me. And he said, yeah, I coach you. I can coach you. Here's how much you need to pay me to do it. And I said, great, done. Let's do it. Send him a PayPal or a Venmo or whatever it was at the time. Later, do I realize, because Jeff told me, he's like, hey, actually, you were my very first client in this capacity, which I was happy to be his guinea pig because he had launched what we're doing here. He helped me launch this. So I started this podcast because lesson number two, you go where the interests are. So I launched this podcast and it's called Wealth Anatomy. And it's geared towards helping medical professionals, doctors, dentists, chiropractors, physicians, veterinarians, mostly small practice owners with their finances. And so I launched this podcast and I do about 20 episodes and I realized, man, I love this medium. I love this medium of podcasting. I love just talking and sharing concepts and sharing ideas, but I don't want to continue to have this conversation about money. So I'm going to do my financial planning practice. This is going well. I've got the residual income coming in. I've got clients. I'm getting referrals. Things are working. Things are firing over here. I feel good about it. And then I decide, instead of doing Wealth Anatomy, what I really want to do is I really want to help men with this kind of stuff, with their finances, leading their families well. My wife and I had gone through a separation years earlier. I talked with a lot of guys who've been through similar experiences, men who grew up without fathers in their lives like I did as a young boy. And I realized, man, there's a gap. There's a gap between what we as men know and the information that we glean from resources like Men's Health magazine, which is the last place you should be going for resources regarding how to be a man. Maybe get abs, maybe, but not being a man. But there's a gap between what we know we should be doing and what we're actually doing. And if I can help bridge the gap for the men who would listen, but also for myself, and in the meantime, get some one-on-one coaching from guys who would join my podcast, this would be a pretty cool gig. So that's what I did. And I launched in 2015, the Order of Man podcast. And from day one, the thing just exploded, took off from day one. I think I had more downloads on day one with my podcast, Order of Man, than I probably did collectively with the Wealth Anatomy podcast. And I realized very quickly I was onto something. And so I was doing my financial planning practice and doing the 9-to-5 and doing my work and doing a good job and making income and all this stuff. But gradually, the financial planning, the Order of Man stuff was taking more time. And that's the next lesson, is that I didn't burn the bridges. I didn't burn the boats. A lot of people burn the boats. And you ask, well, what did you do? And they're like, well, I didn't do that because blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to tell you to burn the boats because I think there's an opportunity for you guys to do your work, your career, your path, whatever you're on right now, and then also dabble in some other things and gradually build this up over time because you have responsibilities, you have obligations. Right? Just like I do. I had my son, maybe even at that point, I think I probably had 3 kids at that point. I'd have to think about their dates of birth, but sometimes that's hard for me to remember. If you're a guy, you understand that. I had 3 or 4 kids at the time. I had my wife to take care of. I had mortgages to pay. I had bills to take care of. I had this financial planning practice over here I needed to take care of. So I had responsibilities. I had clients that I needed to work with. And so I'm doing the Order of Man thing, and gradually it's taking more and more time. And my wife comes to me one day and she says, hey, I really appreciate that you're doing this Order of Man thing. It seems to be that it's going well and that you really like it and it's fulfilling and uplifting to you. And I like to see you do this, but you're also taking income away from the family household, which was true because I was doing less and less financial planning at the time. And that's the next lesson that I just shared with you, right? Grow it gradually, build it gradually. And she said to me, I really think you ought to scale back and focus on the financial planning stuff. or you ought to find a way to make money. And I wasn't scaling back. If anything, I was going to double down on this order of man stuff because this is what had my attention. This is what had my mind. This is what had my soul, not the financial planning stuff. Not to say that's not important. It is, but this is what had me over here, order of man. And long story short, and for the sake of time, I'll say that I started a group called the Iron Council. And it was for 12 guys. It was for 12 weeks. And we were going to focus on 5 or 6 topics, one every 2 weeks with a recap. I think is why we did 5. So we did 5 topics and then a recap of the last 2 weeks. And I sold this thing out overnight. And I remember the first guy who signed up, Mark Goblowski. And when he signed up, I didn't think, man, this is awesome. I thought, what in the hell is this guy thinking? Like he doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'm doing. I didn't have like the perfect curriculum laid out. I'd never done this before. I just put together a simple outline of things we're going to talk about. And I said, here it is. And he signed up along with 11 other men and sold it out immediately. Now I made about $1,200, maybe a little less if you factor in the software I needed to buy to run the programs and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't about the money, guys. I mean, in a way it was a little bit about the money. And let me explain what I mean by that. It wasn't about making a bunch of money doing it. It was the fact that I proved that I could make income doing it. And that was very important. It made the thing viable. And that's the next lesson. Minimum viable product. Minimum viable product. So we have be humble, right? We have gradually build this thing. We have minimum viable product. And that's where I was. So I'm going to start this minimum viable product. I'm going to launch this thing, see if it works, see if there's interest. Oh, and also, sorry, I skipped lesson number 2, which is go where your interests are. So number 4 is minimum viable product. And at least experiment and see in a low risk setting. I just did a podcast with James Altucher. He talks about 10,000 experiments versus the 10,000 hour rule. You can go back and listen to it. If you're subscribed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This was one of my experiments. Was this going to work? Yes. And then I did another experiment. I launched some t-shirts and it worked. And then I did another experiment. I launched a hat and it worked. And then I did another experiment. I launched an event, a live event, and it didn't work. And so I went back to the drawing board and realized that I wasn't really doing a great job articulating what the point of getting together would be. And so I revamped it and redesigned it and reintroduced it, and it worked. Another experiment. But you got to create the minimum viable product. That's the origin story of Order of Man. It isn't some miraculous, spectacular, groundbreaking, life-altering, earth-shattering story of how we reached, the stratosphere with this business and this movement. It isn't that. It's very modest. It's not glamorous. It's not sexy. It's just kind of bland, maybe even boring. Maybe you're listening to this thing and that's not all that special. That's the point, guys. It isn't special. It isn't something that you couldn't do. It isn't something that any man listening to this podcast is not capable of doing. Guys, if I can do it, I mean, look at me right now. I'm tired. I just got back from a trip. The shirt, you don't even want to know what the shirt smells like because I've been on a plane and everything else, 3 or 4 planes for the last 24 hours. I got sweat rings on my hat. I got to shave, probably got to brush my teeth. Guys, we're the same. So many of you say to me, hey, I just want to hear from regular guys. I want to hear from regular guys. Well, you're saying that because you don't relate with these guys who you perceive as high achievers. I'll tell you what, those guys you perceive as high achievers, like out of your league, out of your class, they're not. They're not. I've talked with 350 plus of these guys. They're not out of your league. They do some things differently. They're very consistent. They apply the lessons I just shared with you. And through consistency and work and time and effort and just grit, maybe a bit of a chip on their shoulder like I do, like I have, they make it work. Guys, I want you to be fulfilled. Here's the beautiful thing. Gone are the days when you have to just grind it out for 60 years of your life just to make ends meet. That's not the reality we live in, guys. It may be in the future, but it's not right now. You know what it is right now? Opportunity, abundance, creativity, resourcefulness. Man, you can make money doing anything. There's some crazy shit out there that people are making boatloads of money doing. And also, by the way, living a pretty good and happy and fulfilled life. Why do I get to go to Hawaii and spend time hunting and spend time with my family? Because I pursued something. I didn't burn the bridges. I didn't burn the boats. I just gradually worked myself into something, and I've been very consistent about it. That's the origin story. It's not exciting. Maybe I wish it were, and then maybe more of you would listen to it or something. I don't know, but like maybe this is not share worthy. Maybe this podcast won't go viral. I'm sure it won't. But that's the reality. I mean, yeah, maybe you're going to hit some home runs here and there. You know, I have. I've landed some great podcast guests. Still landing great podcast guests. Every once in a while, I'll have a post or a video or a podcast or something that goes viral. But one of my mentors, Sean Whalen, says, success swinging singles. I get on base every damn time I'm up to bat. That because I'm good at it. Because I've developed a skill set to be good at it. So guys, I want you to start thinking about what I'm sharing with you today. Stop beating your damn heads against the wall. Stop doing things that you're miserable about. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. You know, we only get so many laps around the sun. My wife and I just celebrated our 17-year anniversary. 17 years. And it feels like just yesterday we exchanged vows. But it's been 17 years. My oldest is 13. I got 5 more laps around the sun with that kid. That's it. Life's too short to play some bullshit game that somebody else tells you have to live. And I'm not telling you that you have to start a business, but I am telling you that you should find something meaningful. I mean, we spend probably 2/3 or more of our lives engaged in work, our career pursuit, and it better damn well be something worthwhile. If it's not, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Guys, be humble. If you need help, look for help. Reach out to people who know, hire somebody. Look for the help. It's there. It's available. Number 2, pursue interests. Pursue the interests and activities that are interesting to you, that are meaningful to you. You don't have to go all in. I'm not telling you to go all in. Gradually, right? You're not burning the boats. You gradually build into this. But pursue things that are interesting and meaningful and significant and take the first step. And gradually and over time and through consistency, I think you'll see that maybe you're going to create your own path, that you don't have to follow anybody else. The path may not have even been cleared before, but that you can go blaze your own trail. We live in an abundant society where that is available. You know, I talk a lot about the things that are wrong in society, and there are plenty. I'm going to keep talking about them. There's a lot of things that are right too. And you got to ask yourself if you're capitalizing on it, because most of you aren't. Most of you living like your granddads and your dads did. And I can't blame you for that. That's what you know. But I'm telling you, there's a different way to do it. And I just laid it out for you. And I'm sorry that maybe I didn't articulate it as well as some, motivational, inspirational social media guru might be able to tell you, and how, if you just pay them 10 grand to do the thing, then all your wildest dreams will come true. That's all bullshit. I just gave you the path, and you don't have to pay me anything. All I'd ask in return is maybe to share the podcast. I don't know, join the Iron Council, buy a hat. I need to get a new hat since this one's thrashed now. Or maybe it's just right, depending on how you look at it. It's all right there, guys. Right at your fingertips. You just need to reach out just a little bit more, then a little more, then a little more, then a little more. That's like I said in this post. Let me pull this up. Here's the paragraph. Small, Seemingly insignificant steps turn into lengthy strides you didn't even realize you were capable of. And that's where I am today. And I don't say that to brag. I don't say it to impress you. I just tell you that because I didn't realize that 6 years ago in 2015, when we started the Order of Man podcast, they would grow what it grew into today. And I didn't do anything sexy or magical or mystical or something that even you wouldn't be able to do. If I can do it, certainly you can. And that's the path. So guys, connect with me. Connect with me here on the podcast, Instagram at Ryan Mickler, Twitter, Facebook. You got to do that because look, I'm telling you, social media is playing games with us. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, they're playing games. Even on the podcast, they're playing games with us. So I need you to share because you need to hear this and more men need to hear this. If you need to hear it, guys in your circle need to hear it. Let them know what you're listening to. If it's serving you, it's going to serve them. And then you get to be the person who actually brought them the resource. And there's value in that. You want to add value to somebody's life? Do it yourself and or present information to them that they may not have in any other context, in any other way. Share with them. All right. And one last note before I wrap things up and go to bed. My son's starting a podcast. He's been wanting to start a podcast, and him and I are going to have conversations on this podcast called Man in the Making. Him and I are going to have conversations about real subjects like growing up and politics and faith and religion and sex and pornography and drugs and alcohol and all the other conversations that fathers should be having with their sons. I'm going to have those conversations with my boy to give you some fodder to be able to have those conversations with your sons. He's also going to be interviewing successful men and asking them questions about how a young man can make himself into a man. So if you're a father and you have boys, this will be a great resource. If you want to learn more, we're going to launch this thing in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You can go to orderofman.com. You can sign up for our emails, and I'll be sure to let you know when we go live with that. Again, it's called Man in the Making. The subtitle or the tagline is Men Are Forged. He's very excited about it. I'm very excited about it. And we have a lot of early excitement from potential guests and also potential listeners as well. So make sure you do that. Outside of that, guys, just share. Keep sharing. Take a screenshot. You're listening to this right now. Take a screenshot. Share it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're doing the thing. Let us know what you like, who you want to hear from. Give us some feedback. Constructive, of course. We'll try to implement as much as we can and make this better because this is a resource for you. So I hope this helped. That is the origin story of Order Man. Not sexy, not glamorous, but damn, it's working well. And that's in large part due to you. So I appreciate you listening. Appreciate you tuning in each and every week. We'll be back next week. Until then, guys, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.